All right, good morning again. This is Louise Savelo with Rails. I'm the consulting and continuing education specialist. I'm new to Rails. If I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, I've been here about 7 weeks, and I'm really thrilled to be hosting this webinar today. It's called How to Discuss eBooks with Patrons with Phil Spirito. I will be turning over the reins to him in just a moment. Just so you know, just a few technical notes. Everyone in the audience is muted. If you, there's a control panel on your right side of your screen. There's a red arrow that you can click to open and close that control panel, and you'll see a box to enter questions during the presentation. And Phil and I will be keeping an eye on those questions, and we'll get to as many as possible during the session. If your audio is not working, you can send a question to the staff and we'll try to help you. Sometimes logging out and logging back in helps, or just check your speakers and the volume settings. If you're calling in on the phone for audio, make sure to enter the access code and the PIN. And we will be recording the session. Thank you to Phil for allowing us to do that so we can share it with you afterwards. And just a reminder that this is two parts. The next one will be the same time next week on May 21st. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Phil. Good morning, Phil.
There we go. Sorry, I was muting my speaker there.
Okay.
Showing my technical prowess already this morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Phil Spirito. I'm currently the managing librarian at the Monroe Library in Washington State, but I used to be an Illinois librarian like most of you and worked at several libraries in the Chicagoland area. And I'll just give you sort of a little background on myself so you can kind of get where I'm coming from before we launch in here. I worked in IT and in information technology for about 10 years, ending right about the time of the recession. I got about 2008, was pretty fed up with the way that information technology treated people mostly, and especially people who have low technology skills. And you know, that's typified by the old "did you turn it on and off again" joke about IT, which is I find to be fairly true, or a lot more abusive than that. So, you know, I got pretty sick of it and fed up and was trying to figure out, well, what career could I do where I was doing more of a service to people, helping people with technology. I had an BA in literature, had a fantasy about being a librarian way back, and when I sort of looked into the career more, I realized, oh, this is all about helping people. This is all about service. This is all about trying to bring information access and information to people. So I started in grad school while still working at my company, and then after a month after that, starting my first classes, got laid off. They sold my part of the company. So I was very ambitious and had a lot of motivation to move very quickly through my master's program and get into the field. I started off with a job as a cyber navigator, and some of you familiar with Chicago Public Library may have heard this hilarious title. Essentially what it was is a computer assistant or computer helper position that I worked in a branch with people that really needed help with technology. And it was a great position, starter position for me. Basically, I worked 20 hours a week, and all I did was computer support. So that was a perfect way for me to get an entry into the public library world of what we do currently, mostly in the public library service, is help people with technology. And, you know, all of us, which I assume we all here because we're Rails members, you guys are anyways, we are all public librarians or public library service staff of some sort, right? So, we're all sort of aware of this reality. I went from there to being a computer. My first librarian job was a instruction and technology librarian. From there, I went to running an adult services department, and then I got out here. But I still am extremely passionate about technology and about helping people with technology. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And before I give you my big statement, you'll sort of understand a little bit about where I'm coming from. And the reality check is just basically what I said, that we really, as library staff, when we're working with technology, and basically today this first section here is really going to be about an overview of how to work with our patrons with technology. That, this is going to be sort of targeted towards ebooks, obviously, but all of this can be used with any technology stuff that we do with patrons. Really, if you're helping them on the public computers, if you're helping them with their phones, anything we do, and we know what we do the gamut. Today is really going to be about different little tricks and techniques that I've learned from other staff people, from myself, from experience, from cause and effect, from having problems. I've kind of narrowed this down into some tricks, and that's a lot about what we're going to talk about today. And sort of at the end, I want to hear from you in the chat, any suggestions you have, anything you want to add. Let's keep in mind that there are no specialists in this field. Nobody's perfect. We can all learn from each other. So if I say something that makes sense to you or doesn't, put something in the chat so your co-learners here today can see what you're saying and get something out of what you're contributing as well. So, any questions, anything, I'm going to try to keep up with the chat as we go, and we'll have it be as much of a conversation as possible. So what's the reality check? The reality check is, hello, everyone. This is 2015. And a large part of our job is helping people with technology. We need to embrace that. We need to realize that that's going to be part of our success on a daily basis, is how good we are at helping people with technology. And that's the thing, is it's up to us if we want to be good members of the community, if we want to be good staff members, if we want to be part of the team where we work, that we have to embrace that. We can't go into work ever thinking, oh gosh, if I have to, now we all have those days, obviously, but we have to embrace it, and that this is the future. The future of libraries is in my opinion, all we have to provide is great service. And when in this day and age where people are getting treated badly in all other phone support, tech support, they can come to the public library and get treated like a human being and get some good help with empathy, and that's key. They're going to really get somebody who feels for their pain and can help them and be understanding. So that's the reality check, and I hope that you guys all agree with me. If you don't, by the end of today, maybe you'll get a little closer. So what's our main goal of helping people in the library, and especially with helping people with technology? And I always think of the word empower or empowerment. And really this, the street signs here really is what it's all about. What we're trying to do is give someone the authority or power to do something themselves. We're going to make them stronger. We got to make them more confident. And especially when technology these days, so much of technology is they're being forced into using. So more and more every day, we're having people come into our libraries and ask, can you help me fill out a job form? This tax season was probably the worst that I've ever been through in the public library because, again, they're giving almost no forms. So, the people are coming in, they're struggling, they don't know what to do. We can only be there to help them. We need to, when we look at helping people in the library, we need to think about empowering them so they leave stronger and feeling good about what they're doing. We've all faced the facts. We know, and we'll talk about this again and again, we all have the situation where the senior citizen comes in and says, I tried to get my child, son or daughter to help me with this, but they just think I'm stupid and they won't help me with it. But that is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do here. We're really trying to help people so they feel better. So they should leave feeling confident. They shouldn't leave feeling stupid. And that's a key to what we're trying to do here. And that's what I try to, whenever I'm working with somebody, I'm trying to keep that word empowerment. And I also try to always be as empathetic as possible. So that's what we're trying to do with all our technology interactions. So seriously, what I made this slide a few years ago, and at the time, I think the Google Watch or the Apple Watch was kind of a joke, and I just thought, really, that this who is even going to have one? And now, I have seen people wearing them, and the reality is we can't ever slow down. We can never ever not be aware of technology. Part of our jobs as library service staff is to be on top of what's new. We have to do that, and because the reality is, seriously, yes, every ridiculous new piece of technology that you think, oh my goodness, is that really something we're going to have in our library? Yes, it's true, we're going to have it. I never thought that I would have an Oculus Rift, which is the virtual reality gaming headset thingy. I'm not even a gamer, but recently I had one of those in my library. My library system owns one, so you can check it out and use it. These kind of technologies that we think, oh, I'm never going to have to deal with that. The next time you say that, the next week somebody's going to be in asking you to show them how to use it. So what can we do? We just have to be as good as possible about learning and embracing. And a lot of today is going to be about how can we do that and not be freaked out, because the reality is it's stressful to keep up. And that the seriously here is also, really, I have to learn another thing? Well, yes, unfortunately, we do have to learn another thing. In fact, we have to learn a lot of things, and that's hopefully we all as library staff embrace the idea that we're here about information. We're here to help people learn, and in that way, that's our job. So, the better we are at it, the better everything's going to be. So just sort of, again, to drive this nail home, we are responsible for our own skills. At the end of the day, if we're looking to our management, if we're looking to our bosses to help us, that's great, but ultimately it's our responsibility to learn and keep up with technology. And when we're talking about ebooks, these are resources that our libraries pay a lot of money for, and we need to be able to help people to use them. Ultimately, it's not about money, obviously, but when you think about it, when your library is paying for a resource, you really, as a library staff person, need to know how that resource works, and you need to know how to show people and help people use it, and you need to promote it. That's just part of your job as library service staff. The better we are at that, that really helps every aspect of our libraries. In the long run, it helps you because it just makes you look like a more responsible employee. And again, I like to think of, we need to get out of our little boxes as much as possible and think about our library as a whole. So when we're doing successful technology trainings with ebooks, we're helping one more person to use the library successfully, which is helping the entire library. And so if we can look at the big picture while also looking at the small picture, that will help us and it'll help the library. It makes you look good. It'll make your reviews better. It'll make your boss like you more, hopefully, But really, we're responsible for that. I hope that we all have good managers who say, do you need some time to work on learning this new technology? But again, we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to be responsible. Sometimes our managers are not aware of something that's going on. There's a new fix in overdrive for this or whatever. Be responsible and tell your manager, hey, this is coming out. I need a half an hour off desk to figure this out. If, again, I know the reality, we don't all have even 15 minutes off desk sometimes to do this stuff, but we all can find time to squeeze it in. So be responsible. What are we being responsible for? Obviously, we're being responsible for constantly improving our skills. Now, most of us, I'm assuming in here, because we're talking about ebooks specifically, at this time, even 5 years ago when I started working in public libraries, we only had one or two, it seemed. In many cases, we only had Overdrive, and that at that time was hard because it was so terrible. But it took a long time to help people to figure out how to use Overdrive. It was just such a pain, and some of you may remember that. But that was the only resource we had, so we could work on that. These days, I can't even count on one hand the amount of resources I have at my current library, and this was the same where I worked at Indian Trails. We had almost 10 different e-resources. How on earth do we keep up with that? Well, the reality is we have to take some time every day to work on it. And, as library users, most of us these days have smartphones, most of us, and if we don't, when your contract runs up, it would be a good idea if you got a smartphone, because the reality is that's the way things are going. And, we can all practice ourselves on our own smartphones. Use the resources that our libraries provide, because obviously, in some cases, most likely we're all people that use the public library. So that's one way to improve your skills. But again, it's your responsibility to stay up on those skills. And unfortunately, we just can't slack, and it feels like a lot of pressure. I know how it feels, especially if technology is already a challenge for you. But we're going to talk more about different ways that you can work with technology. And here I'm going to follow up. Now I'm going to tell you the solution to how to improve your skills and different little tricks and tips for you to do that, because we have to do it. The reality is we have to. So the number one idea here is that we're all working in this together. And I know that we have a majority of mostly women that work in the public library, but this picture is of all these geeky dudes was just so funny. And there's just not a comparable one of all geeky women, unfortunately, or even a good one that was mixed. But these jokers just look pretty hilarious, and I especially like the sweater vest in there, of which I also have one very similar. But the reality is that what we're trying to say here is there are different people in our libraries who are better. Some people are kind of savant about technology, and they're using it constantly, and they know how to learn it, and it's kind of intuitive for them. Those are the kind of people where you want to know who those people are, because ultimately those are the people who are going to help you out of the jam. If you get in a situation where you just don't know how to get a step further, if you're having a problem with Overdrive and you just have never seen this before, the genius, the super geek in your library is probably going to be able to know what that is. And oftentimes what I suggest to people is, or I have also done in the past, is if you have an appointment coming up to work on something that you don't feel that confident in, go talk to the tech geek and say to them, hey, I have this coming up. Can you just kind of talk me through this process? This is how I think it works, etc. In most cases, they're going to love to tell you all their opinions about it and talk about it. So again, find out who those people are, and don't be shy in making friends with them, and trying to, again, realize that these are the people. Some people just are great at technology. Some people grew up with it, and that's all they do. I work with several people, have worked even in my last couple libraries, where they go home and I'm pretty sure all they do at home is do computer stuff. The last thing I want to do is stare at a computer after work. But these are the people that you should make friends with, and again, figure out who those people are. If you are that person in your library, Again, you will feel the pressure of everyone else coming to you to get help for different technology questions. And that's a whole nother story, and we'll talk about that a little bit down the road here. And more power to everybody. But, if you're that tech geek in your library, that can be a hard role as your library is coming into the technology world a little bit more. I just kind of love this idea, and it's not the the slide is so weird, but it really is a good example of what I'm trying to say here, which is one of the best ways we can learn about how to help people with technology in the library or anywhere for that matter is to listen to how your coworkers do it. So you can listen to them helping somebody, and in some cases you'll listen to them make a mistake, or you'll hear them do something that you might have done differently. And in that way, you'll be able to see, oh, you know what, I would have said this, and then it would have maybe gone that way. But what we're listening for is, oh, that person asked this, how could I answer that question? Or how did so-and-so answer that question? A lot of technology stuff and explaining ebook resources, I find, comes down to kind of little scripts that we use. And everybody who does a lot of ebook assistance has these little scripts. So when you get to this screen, here's what we do when we do this. Some people even tell the same little joke every time they get to that point in the assistance, because really we are doing the same task over and over again, sometimes helping people. Although I would argue that these days, because we have so many resources, it's really less and less of the same and more of what am I going to do today? How am I going to embrace this? So eavesdropping on how your coworkers assist people, or shadowing, or just being around while they do it. Oftentimes you'll be sitting next to somebody at a service desk when somebody comes up and does a spontaneous ebook training. Just being there and paying attention to how they do it is going to benefit you in the future, and you'll get little tricks. Oh, that person said that during that assistance, and that's something that can be really helpful. So this is key, obviously, and I think some of this stuff probably can come off to you guys all as really, of course I already know that, Phil. But the reality is, I think sometimes when we get into these situations, we forget. We forget to be patient with people. And especially, I'm just thinking about this guy that I help every time I'm on the service desk, and we all have these type of patrons basically asking the same questions over and over again. Can you show me how to access my flash drive? Can you show me how to get to my pictures? Is this certain person's situation? But those are the best people to practice with, And if you need to go, if you need to leave the service desk and go back in the staff area and have a little cry or a scream after, well, that's fine. But we never can let the patrons see us crack. And being patient with yourself when you're learning technology is equally important. Nobody is expecting anybody to be perfect at this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you need to be patient and accept that, you're doing the best you can, and that the patron especially is doing the best they can. They're there to get help from somebody because most likely it's their last resort. They're coming to the public library because they're not often, although I want this to happen more, and I am very much always promoting Book a Librarian, one-on-one sessions, and telling people they can use the library for their technology help. But oftentimes they're coming to the library as the last resort to get help, and we need to just be patient with them. We need to really, all our good customer service tricks, we need to just allow them to feel comfortable so they can learn what they need to learn, because it's stressful for them, and it could be stressful for you. And hopefully by being patient and being calm, you can talk yourself out of that problem. So I just kind of love this cute rhinoceros here as well, but really what I'm saying here is not to lie or to be deceitful, or what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to let them see that you don't know everything in the entire world. Your confidence, your relaxed nature in any training session with ebooks is always going to put them at ease. And you know, we do need to just kind of fake it. We're doing our best here and we're learning as much as we can. And as I said before, there's no possible way that we can know everything about every one of these resources, especially because they change all the time. They have upgrades, and sadly, sometimes the upgrades we feel are more of a downgrade than an upgrade, although the resources always think that they're fixing something and making something better, obviously. But for us, really, we're really trying to just kind of be calm with ourselves, and it's okay, just that we're doing our best. And you know, if you have to just learn one at a time to just get there, that's what you're going to do. But most often, you're going to be put in a situation, and that, you know, working in the public library, you can't expect that any day is going to be the same as the last. You're going to go into every day working and see something that you never thought you would see before, and have to help somebody with something that you never could even imagine. So it's best to just kind of fake it and feel like, you know what, everything's going to be okay, and I'm going to be fine, and I'm doing a good job. And you know, again, let's not panic. Let's keep calm. And you know, the people, everybody does know what they're doing, but you know, nobody is perfect. We all know that. And you know, most of your coworkers would admit, if you got them all in a room, except for that tech genius, that they're all missing some area of technology. They could all be better at something. Most of us could be better at Excel, you know, that, but really we're going to be better at the ebook resources that we help people out with the most, or the ones that are the most user friendly. Those are going to be the easiest to use, but there are always going to be problems. And again, just like animals, patrons can smell your fear. So, you know, if they come up to the desk and they pull out their crazy Walmart tablet that you've never seen before, and you start to freak out, obviously they're going to sense your fear. You know, they're going to know, oh no, this person can't help me, you know. But again, if we relax, we're calm. You know, I had an 80-year-old guy in the library this week, and I didn't know he was 80 before helping him, but he appeared to be very, you know, I would say on the other side of 70, I was assuming. And he pulled out his iPad, and there's a little part of my brain that was thinking, oh boy, here we go. This is going to be a good one. And, you know, the front part of my brain, or the librarian part of my brain, said, okay, so I'm excited to help this guy with the iPad. And I put on my, you know, my excited face, and you know, there's always the little part of me that's thinking, oh boy, here we go. But you know, the reality is, my outward facing face, I'm giving him some calm, I'm giving him confidence. And it turned out that he really, the what he needed was to figure out how to delete books from his Overdrive wish list, which, the other thing that was funny was, I had never done before in this new app. But because I was relaxed and calm, I knew I could figure it out, and I did, and I showed him. He was happy, and that was that, you know. And we talked about how he uses audiobooks, and you know, the thing is that it doesn't pay for us to assume the worst, obviously. And again, so if we keep calm, we don't panic, never assume the worst. It's always one of those things when you see somebody coming, you never can know, you know, you can never know. So just like with that guy, I didn't know how to use the Overdrive wish list, but basically what I do, and something I came up with a long time ago when I started helping people with e-resources, especially when the market started to really get flooded with different kinds of tablets. And these days we're really very app-based, but there was that time a year and a half or 2 years ago or so, maybe almost 3 years ago, where it seemed like there was 10 kinds of Nooks and Kobos and different kinds of Kindles and all these new tablets, and then people were bringing in tablets that they had bought at Target and that were kind of Android tablets. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. So there was no way that you could know how to help somebody with everything. So instead of saying, I don't know what that is, I don't know, I don't think I can help you with that, I came up with the statement of, let's see if we can figure this out together. So I might say something like, I've never, they often want to know, oh, do you know what this tablet is? Well, sometimes I don't, sometimes you just don't know what it is. But I often say, let's see if we can, I don't know what that is, but I think that we can figure this out together. Let's sit down and try. And just that attitude that we're going to work on something together, a lot of the time is what really gives the people the confidence that, again, they have somebody that's going to help them, that's going to work with them. And people are happy. They're happy just to know that you're there and you're thoughtfully trying to help them. And especially because, again, as I said, we may be the most friendly and best resource that they encounter for technology help. So in some ways, that is the best thing to say. Let's sit down and let's see if we can figure this out. And what a lot of that's a lot of what we do helping people in the library anyways. I've never heard of that book before, but I'm sure I could figure it out. Or I've never this movie with an actor in it that you don't know the name of, but you think it was made in 1986, we can figure that out. But I've never heard of it. So, anyways, how's everybody doing out there? It's always weird doing these webinars. Is everybody hanging in there? I know you're probably all sitting at your desks thinking, what's going on here? But I'm just assuming everybody's doing okay out there as I talk on and on. Just put an exclamation mark in the chat so we all know that everybody's out there. It's still alive. Is anybody putting anything in the questions? No. Okay, good. All right, so let's start talking a little bit about how we can improve our skills and different techniques we have for doing that. So what I do, oh, the comments are coming through. Let me just get that box open. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any of the chat stuff, so that's weird. Yeah, Louise, I don't know. I'm not seeing any chat in the question box, so I'm not sure why that is.
All right, sorry,
But
Phil.
maybe you can turn that on for me. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. But everybody's saying, exclamation point, thumbs up, very good. So
Okay, everything's fine. Okay,
everything's
good.
fine.
So
Yeah.
I just can't. Okay, I can't see anybody's questions. So maybe if you see some good ones, type them in the chat for now, and if not, we'll just continue.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so one of the things that I try to do when I'm learning about technology, or really if I'm learning anything, is, I love these, obviously, we all hate and love acronyms if we work in libraries, obviously. But I just kind of like this one, and this kind of relates to a lot more of what today's librarianship is all about, and really trying to figure out the way that we can be as proactive as possible about our own, no matter what kind of work we're doing in the library. I think this SMART goal setting is really a good way for us to kind of work on goals of technology learning. And again, basically what I'll do is I'll set a little goal for myself to say, if there's a new, let's just say there's a new e-resource coming out, and I'll just say, because we're on Rails, I'll just use Access 360 as an example. Basically, I'd never used it before. I wanted to prep myself on it for this class. So Rails gave me a login, and I created basically this little goal sheet for myself that, and again, sometimes I will actually write this stuff down, and sometimes I'm just thinking about this acronym. But basically, I wanted to be very specific about my goal. So I wanted to make sure that my specific part of the goal was learning Access 360. The measurable part was basically like a learning outcome. I'm going to be able to download and read ebooks and know how to change the font size and set the settings, and I will know how to download and listen to audiobooks. So that was the measurable part. Obviously, it was action-oriented because it was some goals I had to do. I just set it up to learn. I like to have it be time-based, so basically I want to get this done by the end of the week. And for all of us, I think number 4 is one of the most important parts of this, and I think that we forget this, and I think sometimes management also forgets it, is that sometimes our managers have expectations for us that sometimes is not that realistic. If you don't have any off-desk time and that week, and they're expecting you to learn a new resource to be able to do a demo on it the following week, it's going to be very unrealistic for you to try to do that while you're on desk. And in the same way, you should treat yourself that way and realize that you need to be realistic and be realistic with yourself and say, I'm not going to be able to learn this in this amount of time unless I can set this time aside to actually do this. And making it relevant, again, is one of the most important parts to learning, self-guided learning for me. If I can make it relevant, and again, to get back to the smartphone idea, if it's something that I'm using myself, I used to commute a long way from Chicago all the way up to Wheeling every day, for my job. And basically, I got really great at using every resource for audiobooks that I could find. I also obviously used a lot of podcasts, so in that way, it was extremely relevant when somebody came up and wanted to learn about what the resources were for audiobooks or other learning things. Making it relevant for you is obviously going to make learning easier. So being realistic and relevant that's obviously, for me, one of the most important parts. But this is, your acronym can obviously be a little different, and this is just one way. So now we come down to a little more specific discussion of really talking about e-resources and what we can do. And the reality is that, here is just 5 of them. I would imagine that every one of our libraries these days has more than this, and really we can't even count Project Gutenberg as an e-resource. If you're lucky, your library may have that built right into Overdrive, which it can be an add-on, by the way. If your library doesn't, all you need to do is tell Overdrive to do that, and they will add Project Gutenberg into your right into the app, right into the resource. But it's difficult to think about, currently, the library I work at, we have Overdrive, we have 3M, we have Hoopla, we have, seems like we have several other ones that now I'm blanking on. We have Freegal, of course, so you may have a bunch of these different resources in your library, and so trying to keep up with learning them is difficult. If you're in a smaller library environment, hopefully your manager has one person that's kind of keeping up on how these different resources are changing, or if there are, I find it very helpful to have one person or a couple people who are getting there's e-newsletters from Overdrive and 3M, and I think Access, I'm sure they basically, and there's blogs for all these resources. That's a great way to follow them through any changes that they make. So if you can sign up for the email blast from Overdrive, or you can follow the blogs of Freeding or any of these other resources. Basically, you want to sort of be on top of that change or that fix before before your customer is having problems with it, you know. So if you can be on top of that, that is going to make your job easier. It's also going to make you look like a better employee. And again, you know, I don't think that hurts these days. We always want to be the best employee that we can be, I hope. But, you know, it makes your boss has a lot to do, and they appreciate it when somebody is on top of what their job duties are, and also what the, again, it gets back to the big library, which we sort of have to look at like, oh, okay, in the big library, um, big tent librarianship, or however we like to talk about it, we have to think about our library as a whole, and knowing the resources is knowing when they change, and sharing that with your coworkers is a great way for you to really help the entire library. And it's just one more way that you can add value to your job and to your success and to the patron's success. So I'm now seeing the questions. Great, Louise, in the question box. And the resource I was just talking about was Overdrive. You can add the Gutenberg free library into Overdrive, and it comes up as a little sidebar. And when you click on it, you can go to that page and basically download all the out of copyright books from Project Gutenberg. And what's great about that is they just stay in your app, so they never check back. You can delete them, of course. So this is one way that I find and I found to really help myself to learn and to think about every resource, but also to think about how do I talk about these resources with staff. I don't know about Access 360, but thanks. That's a good question. Maybe someone else here can answer that. Someone at Rails definitely can. So the flowchart basically is a way for us to figure out how to talk through this with people, but also by creating a flowchart, you can show it. So basically what I did with this flowchart is I created it, and then I shared it with the people that do technology training in my library, and I said, does this make sense to you? And I talked about it with a bunch of people, and I altered it. So every time someone would say, well, yeah, do you really go to the computer first, or do you go to the device first? You know, so you can see each one of these little bubbles, and you can follow it down to accessing different things. And you know, and this was specific for the library I was working at the time, but you can see how basically, you know, it's either yes or no. Is it a device? You can go this way. Oh, is it app-based? Okay, over on the left in the gold bubbles, you can see the different kinds of apps. You can install the apps, and you can see how that all works. And again, the flowchart is great, and I've found that many people, when they see this slide, a lot of people email me and say, hey, can you provide me with that flowchart? I obviously can. So if anybody wants, they can get my email from Rails, and I can send them this, or the chat. This will probably be the slideshow. We can share that as well with the recording. But the flowchart is a great way for you to work it through in your mind, but also to work it through with your coworkers. And then if you're going to train a staff person, this is a great way to show them. I find that these are a little too techy for most patrons. So giving this to someone who has low technology skills is going to be very confused. But you know, if I know somebody's really great at technology, I'll just give them the flowchart and say, hey, this is how you do it. See what you can do. You know, we always love those kind of interactions when somebody actually really knows their stuff. But at the same time, you know, we have to be sensitive to the people that don't. So I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there's also a free sort of trial resource for making these kind of flowcharts, and I'll email it to somebody, or actually I'll remember what it is and tell you next week. It has kind of a cutesy name. I can't remember what it is, but if anybody knows, there's probably multiple ones out there. This is a nice online tool that allows you to make these spreadsheets or these flowcharts, and it just works really good. And it's like a map, again, just like I wrote on the slide. It is a map in your mind, but it just helps you to parse it out, because so often there are so many steps to doing ebooks, and that's one of the hardest parts, is we can get confused and skip over a step thinking, oh, that's easy. And the problem is it's not easy for the patron, so we have to remember that every step is just as important as every other step to the patron. So making that clear in your mind with the flowchart is very helpful. This should be pretty obvious to everybody, but I like to leave this in here because I have to admit that I am not a big ebook reader, but we should all do it, So I periodically will read, I'll download one onto my phone, or I don't have a tablet these days, but when I had an iPad, I would periodically read an ebook. You want to know what that experience is like, even if you hate it. I personally I would prefer to read a book, of which I love to do. So I'm not a big ebook reader, but to be able to know what it's like and to be able to promote it to people is important. So periodically, it's important for us all to read an ebook, and you still probably will hate it, but it's okay. And in the end, more power to all of us for reading them, because it's important. And the thing is, some people don't have a choice. If you have somebody with a sight, ocular degeneration, sight, or any seeing problems, who large print's not even big enough anymore, that's their option, ebooks. And we want to be compassionate, we want to know how it works, and we want to sympathize with them. And again, that's one of those things that we can be prepared for. If somebody says they have to read ebooks because of their sight, we obviously, like I said before, we really need to know. That's one of the main things I always make sure I know in every resource, is how to increase the font size. Because again, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people use ebooks these days. So read ebooks, use your resources, even if you just use them periodically. I love Zinio, which is the magazine resource. That's one of the ones I forgot to mention earlier. Do I use it all the time? No, but there are times, when I'm somewhere and I don't have something to read, like the doctor's office, and I don't want to pick up one of those germ-infested magazines. Having something on your phone to read is great, So again, have those resources, make yourself use them. Hate them if you want, it's totally fine, but in the end, more power to you if you're using them. And again, it just gets back to relevancy. The more we can talk about it and make it relevant for ourselves, the more the patron will say, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. And sometimes you can even say, well, when I do this, and when you say that seals the deal. Half the time when you make that connection with somebody and they know you're doing the same thing, that's what really breaks the ice for people. So in that way, we can do our best, and we should use the resources anyways, because again, as I've said before, and I say again, it's our job to promote library services. Even though you may go through years of work in the public library without somebody, a boss or a manager or your director, saying that to you, it's your job to promote library services. And it's especially our job to promote these e-resources, because you know what? Again, we pay a lot of money for them. We all love our libraries. And when we think of the big picture, again, getting back to that, when we think of we want our library, we love our library, we want it to succeed, promoting our resources is one way. And by using them, you can promote them a lot easier. So one-on-one sessions, as I mentioned way in the beginning, these are a lot of what helps people to build their confidence, to get practice, to have trial and error to figure out what the best way is to help somebody with ebooks. And again, there is no tried and true way. We all have different personalities. We have to find the way to teach people that is most comfortable for each of us. And practicing in a one-on-one session is a great way to do that. The best thing is when it's a scheduled one-on-one session is it gives you time to prep. So if I'm going to deal with somebody that has an iPad and they're using Overdrive and they've never used it, I know that much information before. I can just practice and make sure I know what's going on before the person comes in. And that's great because then you know that you have a little more confidence going in, and then you're ready, and they can, again, it's all building blocks on each other. They can recognize your confidence. You feel calm, a little calmer because you kind of have reviewed it before, and all these things are great. And doing the one-on-one session is just a great way to be prepared and do it. I also encourage people to shadow other people that are doing one-on-ones, and I think that's a great way to learn. And again, that gets back to the eavesdropping thing. Listening to your coworker, hopefully somebody that's really good at doing ebook training, listening to them and the little scripts they use and the way they talk about things is a way to get better and to learn. And the thing that I also do is I will shadow my staff. Excuse me, I need a drink of water. I'll shadow my staff who are doing one-on-ones and make suggestions to them. So, you can always ask somebody who is better at doing technology ebook training to shadow you and critique you, and that's a good way to learn, oh, I could have said that, that's right. Or, because oftentimes someone who's shadowing you will notice that, oh, that's when the patron kind of got confused when you said that. So doing one-on-one sessions can be great in so many ways, and it's good to learn. And again, I volunteer for them. I'll do it. Because if you're on the information desk these days, chances are you're doing a lot of spontaneous one-on-one training anyways. But having a scheduled one is great because it gives you a little time to prep and take a breath and be prepared. So it seems crazy to talk about this kind of near the second half, but again, this is all the stuff that we're building on here in this session. And the reality is I've already talked about a lot of this stuff in the early part, but I think that we need to embrace customer service. We need to embrace service in general because, at the end of the day, these days, people can go anywhere to get what we have at the public library. They can't always get it for free, but they have many choices for everything that we provide at the public library. Thanks for that comment. But the funny thing is that we don't always remember that customer service is our priority. If you think about, people can go anywhere to get books, magazines, DVDs, ebooks, audiobooks, story times, you name it. Everything we provide, they could go somewhere else to get. What does that mean we need to do? That means that we need to embrace customer service. We need to be the best service. We need to provide that happy, smiling, welcoming service that is going to make people come back and use the library. And that, you guys are really lucky. I realize now that I'm not in Illinois anymore, that Illinois is very focused on service first in libraries. And I think that's a great thing. And I think that we really need to remember that. And again, when we're talking about ebooks, customer service is so important. And, for years in IT, all I heard was complaints. I would be listening to the people in the phone support section of my company, and they were so nasty and so terrible. And we've all had these situations where we've called phone support, and it's just been awful. we can provide the best support in the public library because we're compassionate. We're there to help people. So again, think about customer service, especially when you're helping people with technology. And again, these are all just different words that are basically saying the same thing. And it really, whether you're thinking about it as the reference interview or as a tutorial or coaching or assistance or instruction, tech support, etc., we really need to be thinking about, encouragement, you name it. These are the things we should all be approaching these with the best customer service that we can think of. So let's go through just a few of the top level things. And, we've all hopefully had some kind of customer service training, but so I'm going to just go through a couple of these pretty quickly. But really, we need to be approachable. And when people are coming to ask for help with ebooks, they are generally feeling stupid, they're feeling bad, they're often self-deprecating of themselves. So we really need to be approachable. We need to have a big smile. We need to be ready to talk to them. We have good, good tone. And again, the funny thing is there aren't really any ebook reference questions, but I like to break this down into these three ones: yes, no, and what, basically. So we're going to do the best customer service we can. We're going to treat them well. We're going to smile when they approach, and then throughout the interaction, we need to just keep remembering our attitude, keep remembering our motto. Am I raising my voice? Am I talking too loud? We need to be sensitive to the people. This slide is basically, these two kids they were doing some kind of cleanup project when their teacher realized that they could also be learning about the ecology of this area. So the teacher basically embraced that moment and said, well, we could be learning at the same time as we're helping to clean up this wetland. And basically what I'm always trying to remember is when we're on the information desk, we always should embrace the teachable moment. And what does that mean? That means that we're all teachers, and by educating somebody about how to do something, we're going all the way back to those first slides. We're empowering them. We're going to let them leave knowing how to do something they didn't know how to do before. So really, anytime you're helping somebody, you should embrace the teachable moment if you can, and help them to learn how to use the resource. It's very easy for us to look at their device and they say, well, I'm having trouble doing this, and you just point at the device and you click, 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 and then that's all done. But the reality is we need to take a little more time and embrace the teachable moment. Say, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to show this person how to do this. So when we're working with people with ebooks, e-resources especially, one of the things that I think I am constantly doing, and I can't emphasize the importance of this enough, and that's why, Scooby-Doo basically he is very worried about that ghost, obviously, down there in the corner. But the serious nature of this is that we need to, just like when we're doing a reference interview, we need to be listening more than we would in any other situation. And we'll talk about this more, but really what we're listening for and what we're trying to figure out are different clues about the person's technical skills and or knowledge. And what that helps us with is going back to the flowchart or the roadmap. We need to know when we can skip a part of the flowchart. we need to know when we have to emphasize even more a part of the flow chart. So we should always be, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll ask them some questions before to just kind of see where they're at with their device. Obviously, have you read, have you used, what do you use your iPad for, is a great question. If they say, well, I basically use it to play solitaire, most likely that this person is going to need a little more time and a lot of patience to go through each step carefully. But again, what we're looking for is we're looking for different clues that help us to know, and also what we should be looking for is, how am I doing? So some of the clues are, does this person seem confused? Do they seem annoyed? Do they seem relaxed? Do they seem happy? These are some questions that I'm always kind of looking at. So, in our job as technology trainers, or when we're discussing ebooks with patrons, we need to be watching ourselves. We need to be watching them. We need to be looking for clues. We need to be thinking about the flow chart. We need to be actively working through. In a lot of cases, we need to be wondering, is their device even working correctly? So it's hard to know. If you told somebody on the outside of outside of libraries that this is the kind of work you did, I think sometimes that they would they would be surprised. If we all know about helping our parents do technology and how that can be, but sometimes I'll sit there and watch my wife help her mom to do something with photo storage or something, and I think to myself, I'm watching the interaction and I'm thinking, well, how would I have done that differently? And most people in the world don't have the capacity to do a good technology training because it's not something that they do a lot, but it comes with practice and we get better at it. And some of these little tricks are ways that we can be better at it, but it's a lot to think about in every interaction. But I'm always kind of looking for clues. And again, this comes naturally as you get better at it. But if you can sense that a patron is having trouble, or that they do have extremely low technology skills, or oftentimes the other thing that's great is if they have high technology skills and you can just skip ahead. That's also great. Excuse me, drink of water. So this is my duck from Chicago, and his name was Gary, although he was a lady. But Gary was always very interested. And, again, this kind of gets back to the fake it till you make it slide. In some ways, sometimes it's hard to be interested after you've done, if you've done 5 overdrive one-on-ones that week and it's been very difficult and challenging, and it gets to be Friday and you've worked all week and you're on your 8th desk shift, and somebody comes up and asks an overdrive question, how can you possibly get it together to show interest still? Well, again, sometimes you just need to fake it a little bit and put on a smiley face and show some interest. And really what we need to do is we need to show interest, because that makes people comfortable. And that makes people, I don't know how many times a day we have to hear people say, I don't want to bother you. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm taking so much of your time. And basically what I tell them is, this is my job. I'm paid to help you. And you're helping me to keep my job, and I'm here to help you as much as you want. We can all be frustrated with the person that comes back 50 times with the same question, but when you have that sweet little old lady who, she likes reading books on her Kindle Fire, but she just cannot get it together to remember the process or to even go through her notes. So if she wants to bring in the Kindle Fire and have us load new books on it, I am happy to do that. And again, by showing interest, and it just gets back to good customer service. It gets back to the larger idea of us supporting our whole library and thinking about our library as a whole and making the library better. We need to be interested, and it helps our coworkers too. When our coworkers see that we're excited and interested about helping people with ebooks, that might be infectious. It might not be infectious, but I do my best to infect everyone with my level of interest and excitement about helping people. And again, this just goes back and builds on the other stuff and just part of the reference interview. So this is not anything new, but really we need to listen and listen and listen to the patron. And the more you can get them to say during your interaction with them, the more you're going to be able to figure out those little hidden secrets that they have. Oh, they have an email, but they don't even know how to use it. So how are they going to hear about their holds being ready? So these are the kind of things, if you just sit down with somebody and explain and think you're going to talk the whole time and get through the ebook training really quick, that's not a good attitude to have. It's better to take your time, to listen carefully, and to just try to figure out what that patron, what their needs are. And again, the biggest success you're going to have is, for me, my goal is to help them get a book. But before they leave, I want to know, I'm hoping that they're going to be able to learn how to use this resource themselves. And you're not going to always get there in one training with some people, but if you do your best and you think of that goal, you need to be listening to them and what they say to try to make sure that you are meeting their needs. And also that, the reality is that sometimes people in these kind of trainings, after a certain amount of time, they just glaze over. They can't take in any more information. And so that is a very important thing to be watching out for. And you'll know when somebody is having information overload. And we've all worked with people who, they get to a certain point and they just cannot take in any more information. So, in that case, it might be good to just set it as, you know what, we got through this today. Why don't you schedule another appointment and come back as soon as you can, and we'll go through some other stuff. But you won't know if you're just barreling through the training as you see fit. We need to tailor every training to each individual patron. And that's another thing that we can do in the public library in providing service, is we can truly tailor our trainings to the skill level, to the personality, to the learning style of each person. And that's not something that people are going to get anywhere else. And again, just to reiterate, there's my favorite old school librarian. We just need to listen. What are they saying? What are they telling us? And that's going to help us to figure it out. So when I'm getting through my, I'm getting sort of going in the beginning of a training. And actually, I'm going to talk about this slide in two parts here. Whenever I came up with this idea a few years ago when I started offering a one-on-one service in a library I worked at. When we sign the person up for the one-on-one service, we would always ask them, okay, so what do you want to learn? And then we'd write that down as a note. And I would always tell the people as they were leaving, so go home between now and when you're coming in and make a list of questions. So bring that list of questions with you. Now, what that does is two things. Basically, it makes them think about the problem they're having and makes them clearly articulate what that problem is and what the questions they have. What's great about that is when they come in, the trainer can go through, they can go through that list of questions, look at it, and that will answer some of their clues, as we were talking about before, and looking for secrets and clues. But it'll also help them to plan their roadmap of how they want to do the training. And at the end, they can look at the person and go through and have them look at the questions and make sure that everything got answered. And on that same note, note-taking, at the beginning of every training, I make sure the person has a nice sheet of paper and a pen, pencil, whatever. And I I say to them, okay, throughout this training, we're going to take it step by step, and I want you to write down notes on how you are going to do this process. Now, there's several things about notes that are interesting. If your library is, hopefully your library has some e-resource handouts. If you do, those are great, and you can give those to people as their notes, and then they often will write additional notes on the handout to help them to remember, oh, it's this, or sometimes the handout doesn't have enough detail in it. Oftentimes you will also have people that write down, I've noticed this, there's a little bit of a trend with some personality types where they write down something that later when they look at their notes doesn't make any sense to them. So what I will do is sometimes, depending on the person, I will actually write the notes for them in a way that reiterates the way I said it to them, and they've practiced. And sometimes, excuse me, 90 minutes of constant talking. Oftentimes what's happening is that the people, if I write the notes down for them in kind of a clear blocky script, and I'm writing down the same things I'm saying and the same things they're practicing, that I think sometimes is more successful for them. But the reality is if they leave with notes about the process, that really helps. Now, I've also had people who, at the end, when we're practicing, will say, well, what do I do now? And I say, well, what's it say on your notes? And they say, oh, right. So sometimes you have to make a note to remind them about their notes, so and then I often have the people of doing the Homer thing, whereas in this slide is really they're like, what I didn't write that down, what are you saying? So if you get them in a culture of note taking, that will really help them to sort of solidify the thing in there for them. And then, after, I'm getting to the end of a training session, and basically what I'll do is when I'm training somebody, I kind of talk to them through the process. And depending on the person, and there's all different philosophies about this, a lot of libraries will say, you should never touch the patron's device. And what I say to that is, right, but some patrons don't even know how to touch their own device. So, sometimes I'm driving, sometimes they're driving. Again, you need to figure that out. You need to figure out what's going to be the most successful for you and for the patron. But in this situation, I'm nearing the end. I've demonstrated how the resource works, and I've talked them through all the steps. They've taken notes. At the end, I'll go through the whole process one more time and make sure they kind of understand and are knowing what's happening there. And then I'll review it. As I said, after reviewing the process, I'll then say to them, okay, you now do the process, and I'll watch them. And you're there to say to them, hey, that you could have done this a little better, you could have done that, or you're there to say, don't forget about doing that. But also the other thing, and encouraging them, hey, you wrote it down on your notes. And this is sometimes where I'll find that, oh, what they wrote down on their notes doesn't make any sense to them. So you might go back and change that note for them to say, oh, do this or do that. So you want to watch their process of how they're doing it so that you can make little adjustments to their process. So that's about it for today. And just to kind of reiterate what we're going to do next week, if you have any questions or comments, now's a good time to throw them in the chat just to add to the end of our session here. But what we're going to do next week, just so you know, is we're going to spend the majority of time going through. First, probably we'll do overdrive because that's going to take the longest, and most people usually have the most questions about Overdrive. We'll hit on 3M. We'll talk about Access 360. We'll talk about my new favorite, Hoopla. We may talk about Freeding for a few minutes, depending on how much time we have. I don't talk about Zinio because the interface is so special, but it's supposed to be getting better. But we don't. It just usually there's no time to talk about that. And that's a great question. Let's see here. My chat window is really small. Do I advocate for more one-on-one sessions versus what? I can't quite see, Gretchen. This chat window could be bigger. Let's see here. Can I do this? No. I basically encourage people to do one-on-one sessions when they can schedule them. I want to provide the service level that I want to provide is that if somebody comes up to the desk, I want to help them then. So if they have time, and we have staff, I'll get somebody to come out and help them. If it's a quickish question, or even if it seems quiet on the desk, I want my staff to address that situation then. One-on-ones are great for scheduling for people who don't have the time then to learn. They're also great for people, when you tell somebody, oh, if you have more questions about that, call us and we can schedule an appointment. That's a great time. That's when people will often call back and say, oh, I heard I could schedule an hour-long appointment. And that's the other thing is we don't ever, I would say we never have an hour when we're on the information desk. But what we do have is the ability to do as much as we can and then advertise or promote the one-on-one session. We didn't talk too much about classes here. That's sort of like we could go on a whole nother 90 minutes about classes on that, and I've had basically and done in the last 5 years all different kinds of classes. I've done ones that were just about one resource and were kind of hands-on. I've done promotional classes where I talked about all our resources. I've done specific iOS or iPad, iPhone classes where we just talked about the apps for the library apps that worked on those devices. It really depends on your patrons. Can you get a bunch of people to come to an ebook class? What I really like when I'm doing a class is to have several staff people available. So when people come in, you could do kind of a quick overview of here's the resources we offer. In a half hour or even 20 minutes, you could kind of just blast through the different resources you have, what devices they work for, how they work quickly, and then you have a bunch of staff people who can work with individual people to help them. You might get in a situation where you have to definitely assist people to learn, all the different things. Oh, sorry about that, Karen. That question was just the only question it said was classes, so I was just talking about that. And the previous question was, do you advocate for more or less one-on-ones, I think is what Gretchen was asking. Yeah, and Carla, that's a great question too. And it's something I didn't talk about today, but I will talk about a little bit more next week. But when I was talking about handouts previously, and that's another great thing for classes is, all of our libraries have different resources, and we should share, and we should not ever worry about borrowing. So there's a lot of people who have training videos or and different resources, and it just really depends. I think that videos are difficult for people because it doesn't give them the hands-on. So videos are great for people who have very high-level tech skills and can use can even use YouTube. I mean, sometimes those are the people that we need to help the most. What is the best way to learn about managing overdrive as an employee versus a versus explaining it, I'm assuming is that question, Jill? Yeah, right. Um, that's a good question. I think, are you talking about, I'm just confused if you maybe are talking about, are you the person that manages overdrive for your library? Is that your job to do that? Louise, can you paste that whole question in there? I can't see. Oh, versus explaining it to patrons, right? Um, yeah, I mean, I think the best way is really hands-on. I think learning it by doing it and using it, as I said earlier, and that's the thing is, I don't want to sound, when I said I think everybody needs to have a smartphone, I don't want to sound like a jerk when I say that, as in, well, you just really have to get with the technology. That's not what I mean at all. But what I mean was we have to sort of embrace the technology that is happening in our world right now. And our world is all about smartphones. And, if we have, you might not be able to afford to buy a tablet or an iPad. These days, I don't find much use for it, but we all can get, with our next contract, we all can get a smartphone when our cell phone contracts run out. You don't have to get a super fancy one. You just have to get one that can use apps. And, that the best way to learn about overdrive is to use it for yourself. Yeah, that's a great comment from Michael. There are tons of resources on Overdrive's website for learning. Um, there's also a lot of help from Overdrive. I think my motto has always been that, and those are all great for learning for us, but my motto is that we need to be the ones to give the help to the patrons. A lot of libraries these days will actually direct people to the Overdrive help page, which that's one way of doing things. But for me, I want to be there to help the patron. That's my job. My job is to help people and to be there to assist them. So Michael's comment is great, and for us to learn, you can really find all kinds of stuff on these websites. And again, just to get back to the other question about the training videos, a lot of times what I'll do is when I'm trying to figure a question out about one of these resources, I'll look at what other libraries are saying and try to find out if anybody else has had the problem or solved it, and that oftentimes will be a great way to figure something out. So the question is, any tips for doing one-on-one with kids? The answer to that from me is I don't work with kids a lot in the library. I've always been in the adult services department. And now that I manage a library, I work with kids a little bit more, but I don't do one-on-ones with them so much. I think everything that we're learning in here, though, really is kind of has to be doubled down for kids. We have to be patient. We have to be sensitive. We have to remember that kids a lot are mimics, so the attitude that we have will sometimes be mimicked by the children, so we want to make sure we're being focused. And they're often our kids' tolerance level for time is very different, so we need to be sensitive to that. But I would say talk to your children librarians, and they know a lot more than we do. Yeah, that's a great tip from Oak Park about the chargers. We now keep a charger kit at our desk that we check out different chargers to people, and I find it's getting used all the time. So it's a great thing to provide. It's just a little added service that we can provide at the desk. And these days you only really need 3 or 4 different chargers, and you're covering just about every device out there. So, that's a great suggestion. Any other questions? Because I think we're almost done for today.
I think that's all I see in the chat box, so if anyone has any last minute questions, go ahead and put those in now.
And I will share the slides with Louise, and Louise, you can post it somewhere.
Yeah, I'll share it with those who registered. I'll
Great.
email it to everyone. Thanks.
Well,
All right.
thanks to everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. And just a reminder to everyone that this is a two-parter webinar, so we'll meet again next Thursday, May 21st at 10:30.
All right. See you later.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Bye.
Bye-bye.